There's some question about whose idea it was to call it a Mellotron. It certainly wasn't Chamberlain's. And from what I can gather from what Les told us, that it was actually Bill Franson that came up with the name Mellotron. And he always used to say it was mellifluous. So basically, on that name, they set up a company in London, which is the parent company called Mellotron Limited. Meanwhile, in Streatley, the manufacturing base was created, and they were actually called Mellotronics Manufacturing Limited. So you've got two separate entities. You've got the parent company in London, and of course they were dealing with the sales. So Mellotronics Manufacturing did just that. They produced the machines. They had no part particularly in sales, other than Bill Franson was retained as an area sales manager. Obviously the Mark I came about at the end of 1963. Very soon it was changed to Mark II, which is basically a very similar animal, just a bit more revised. Still a big machine, 350 pounds. So London, I think, were then thinking, we need to up the production a bit and make it cheaper, because at 1,000 guineas, it's a lot of money for a Mark II. So the concept of a smaller machine and a cheaper machine to produce. So they went to 1/4-inch tape, 2-track, instead of 3-track, 3/8. So rather than have it specially made, they could just buy 1/4-inch tape off the shelf. 1/4-inch tape, reduce the size of the machine, make it lighter, take the amplifiers out of it, and if you want it, a separate cabinet. So you've got a separate amplifier extension cabinet, if you like, but the machine itself doesn't have its own speakers built in. That way, we make it £250, not 350. So obviously it's lighter, and it was really aimed more at the domestic market rather than a club or pub or whatever. We're looking at the idea of it going into people's houses, obviously rich people. They had help with the design of the cabinet, I think, from the London Design Centre, because it is quite roundy and very 70s looking for something that came out in 1966. And they produced the M300 from 1966 to 1970. The actual recordings of the sounds are refreshingly clean and to a degree to do a sound aggregation, but I think they got more of a handle on what they were doing, because this was take 2 of the Mellotron. And so they decided to record a new library, an entire new library for the M300. The problem with the Mark II is, at the time, the technology wasn't there to sort out the pitch control properly. So what they did is they used a synchronous motor and a variable frequency oscillator to change the cycles, the frequency that the motor's running on. The problem with that is it was voltage dependent. So if you used one in a live gig and you had enough lights, the lights goes up, the pitch goes down. Not good. I believe the Moody Blues in the early days had somebody on a variable transformer, a variac, adjusting the pitch for them to keep the voltage the same. Subsequently, they fitted DC motors in their machines. And of course, when the M300 came out, it got a DC motor and a much better motor control, far less dependent on voltage, so it tended to stay in tune, which of course was good. So the Moody Blues had one, and of course used it on Watching and Waiting, which is a classic use of M300 strings, which sound entirely different to the original Mark II sound, or the M400. They built 52 M300s because really they were still looking at home entertainment, and in reality bands wanted them. Because once people realised you could have a choir or violins or whatever out of one keyboard, we wanted one on stage. So some bright spark somewhere along the line, probably at Mellotron, said, why don't we have a single keyboard just with leads on? Because people don't need the rhythms. They want sounds to play along with the music. So after a certain amount of deliberation, a design was drawn up, and the first M400 was built in 1970. You could put Mark II sounds on it, and they were available, but predominantly it was sold flute, violins and brass, or flute, violins and cello. And then of course subsequently we have church organ and 8 choir and things like that, which really opens up the market and makes it a much more versatile machine.